Hello, and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And this is Mark Florence.
And today we're talking about They Live. This movie came out in 1988. It's 86% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It is directed, written by, and composed by John Carpenter. It had a budget of $4 million and made $13 million at the box office. Now, some interesting facts about it. It was actually based on the short story from 1963 called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. And because it was based on that, and it got a little bit of influence from this short faux documentary from the 70s, John Carpenter actually used a pseudonym, Frank Armitage, as the writer. So if you looked at the credits, it says it's written by Frank Armitage, but it was actually John Carpenter.
Interesting. I didn't even know John Carpenter was involved with this movie at all. I'd actually never even heard of this movie in my entire life before we watched it. So interesting to hear that a successful, director like himself did this.
Now, this movie is starring Roddy Piper, and it has a lot of iconic lines and moments and themes in it. John Carpenter has defended his script, and a lot of like white nationalists, neo-Nazis, white supremacists claim, it's an allegory for the Jewish people controlling the world. And John Carpenter emphatically says, no, absolutely not. It is about yuppies and unrestrained capitalism, and sort of the way that he was viewing the world, and just, every single ad on TV during this Reagan era was about money and greed and politics, and who are the people in control, and what do they want the rest of us to do, the middle class, the poor, the homeless. And so it explores these major themes. And I've been seeing a lot of memes and GIFs from this movie being shared currently in our state of the world, fighting the police, or fighting, sort of just government in general. And I was like, let's rewatch this. I only had watched it once in my younger years, and it really struck me when I was younger. During this rewatch, it didn't hit me as hard as it did in my initial watch, and, maybe it didn't age as well. I don't know. But, I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, there were a lot of metaphors and like symbolism, I felt like, in this movie. Like you said earlier, like greed, capitalism, consumerism, government control, police brutality, class, like differences in like class, like lower class versus upper class. So yeah, the sunglasses were like a metaphoric, like being woke or something like that.
Yeah, good point. And I was saying too, like, we view everything through these rose-colored glasses, like people with privilege or whatever, and then we just don't see the world as it truly is. And then when Roddy Piper gets his hands on these sunglasses from this group who's trying to, free everyone and free their minds, he sees everything in black and white, and how clear it is. And, all of a sudden everything says obey, like money says this is your God, and everything's just about consumerism and not questioning authority. And so they just want everybody to be sort of asleep and like zombies so that they can keep living their best lives. And of course, they, meaning the super rich, who in this case are actually aliens who are invading the planet.
Yeah, and they chose to make them look like these weird skeleton creatures. They had a cool look to them. I thought that was pretty cool. And it seemed like they knew when they were spotted by the sunglasses, and they'd always go to right to their watch and be like, yeah, I'm on the corner of 3rd and 8th Street, and dude with a mullet's looking at me.
Now, Roddy Piper was a famous wrestler. He actually left WWE or WWF, whatever it was at the time, in order to make this movie. The head of the WWE did not want him to make this movie, and he's like, guess what? Like, I'm going to do it. They eventually let him back in. And Roddy Piper has claimed like he's the first successful wrestler to have this film career, that he had a #1 box office hit the weekend this movie came out. So, that was before The Rock or John Cena or who else are wrestlers that have moved on to movies.
Jesse Ventura, I'd say. I'm sure Hulk Hogan's in a movie or two. It's about all I can think of. Yeah, but I thought it was kind of like John Cena-esque, like this Rowdy Piper guy. I've heard the name Rowdy Piper a lot. I didn't really know who he was exactly, even though I kind of used to watch wrestling back in the day. But, I thought he was a lot like John Cena, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that John Cena energy. Oh, Dave Bautista. Is Dave Bautista a wrestler or not? Oh, anyway. Rowdy Piper. He's Canadian, and we figured it out because he said sorry in a scene, and then we looked it up, and yes, of course, he was born in Saskatchewan.
And like a typical wrestler of that time, I think this guy was probably on steroids. He was a little bit too ripped for his own good, I felt like.
I was reading an interview with him, and he said that people questioned his body and thought that they had, like, computer-generated his muscles. He's like, no, that's all me, baby.
Yeah, all you and a bunch of steroids, dude, or HGH or something. I'm sure, I don't know. It seemed like the late 80s were, for Major League Baseball, for wrestling, it was all about the steroids, I felt like. Like the Ultimate Warrior, a couple other wrestlers, definitely on the juice.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, this plot, it's sort of Rambo-esque in the sense that, like First Blood, this drifter comes into town, but of course it's not a small town. It's LA, and he is trying to get a job. He's trying to, figure out where to live, where to get a paycheck so that he can establish himself and his life. I noticed that he was wearing a wedding ring, and I'm like, I wonder if that's going to come into play. But I read that Roddy Piper, the actor, just refused to take off his wedding ring, so they just never acknowledged it.
God, seriously? Like, dude, you're going to act, you have to be willing to take off your wedding ring. Like people watching the movie, like, hell, you're going to want this huge backstory about your wife or your ex-wife or your love, like, and none of that ever came to light in this film.
But, it gave it an air of mystery, so I don't think it ruined it. Like, I think John Carpenter knew which battles he had to pick, and that was not one of them. Like, okay, so he's wearing a wedding ring, whatever.
Yeah. I think a lot of people in adult films also wear wedding rings, so...
How would you know that?
That's what my friend told me. So a lot of themes that are very pertinent right now, like the police brutality were in this movie. The police seem to be on the side of these aliens somehow, so I thought that was interesting.
It was, and it was uncomfortable because even though I realized that they were aliens and they were bad guys, he just, like, as soon as he got a hold of some weapons, he just started killing them, assassinating them, and it was like, oh, I mean, I felt uncomfortable at it because it was pretty brutal, yet at the same time I realized they were the bad guys. But when he came in contact with human cops, he would let them go. And so, I mean, he did have, like, a moral standard. And
earlier in the movie, they came into this little, like, camp thing he was staying at with a bunch of other people. Kind of like riots, like, were going on, like, earlier this week. And they just took down this whole camp with all these riot police and, like, bulldozers and stuff. And they were just, like, I don't know if they were shooting. I don't think they were actually shooting people, but they were, like, beating the hell out of people. And, like, they were beating up, like, the leaders and stuff. So I thought that was kind of, it was 30 years ago or whatever it was, but still similar themes.
Almost 40 years ago, right? I mean, well, 32 years ago. But, one scene that was really uncomfortable, they were beating up the blind preacher. And he was African-American, and it was just like, dudes, this is completely unnecessary, of course. And, it was very, I mean, I see why people are sharing memes and GIFs from this movie now with everything going on. This fight scene in the alley, I realize I'm jumping ahead. He's trying to get his friend to put on the sunglasses so that he can see what he sees. And apparently the fight scene was only supposed to be like 30 seconds long or something. It ended up being, It ended up being 5.5 minute fight scene that took 3 weeks to rehearse. It was incredibly brutal and funny. is what John Carpenter said. And he just thought, it'd be a little fight, but they ended up working so hard on it. And it was really kind of truly like they didn't necessarily pull punches, apparently, that it was kind of gruesome. And John Carpenter left it in because it gets to the point of being like ridiculously funny. They just keep going.
It seemed a bit long to me. It seemed like a wrestling match, like and I'm sure the Rowdy Piper guy like insisted on keep going. Like you'd think the fight was over, and then the other guy would get up and attack the other guy, and then he would think it's over, and it just kept going back and forth. And the whole fight was basically about the guy didn't want to try on the sunglasses. So, but yeah, I mean, it was probably the longest like one-on-one fight I've ever seen in a movie.
It is it's ranked like as one of the greatest fight scenes of all time in some lists I read. So, people appreciate it. And it is pretty realistic. I mean, it's not like they're, diving off helicopters or anything. They're just beating the crap out of each other in an alley with like 2x4 or whatever they can find. Yeah,
totally. Went to the wrestling. I recognized the other actor. I don't know. I forgot his name, but he did a great job too. And yeah, they just kept going back and forth. And they're both getting their ass kicked. And Rowdy's face was all swollen and bloody after, but I guess technically he won the fight because the guy tried on the sunglasses.
Now, John Carpenter initially wanted Kurt Russell in the lead, but he had just cast him and directed him in Escape from New York, and was that what it was? Or The Thing? Like, he just couldn't cast him in another movie. Keith David is who is the guy who plays Frank. He was in The Thing as well, and so that's why John Carpenter cast him. But he ended up casting Roddy Piper because he was just sort of like real and had that thing about him.
I was gonna say he reminded me a lot of the Snake Plissken character from Escape from L.A. and Escape from New York. So I could actually picture him doing it. It was like the dude with a mullet, like kind of a badass dude, just kicking ass the whole time.
Yeah. No, I totally get that Kurt Russell could have been in this role.
This movie really kind of reminded me of like a Twilight Zone episode where it's like there's this huge like conceptual thing, which is like the sunglasses, which change like everything in the whole movie.
Yeah, or even like The Matrix, like you all of a sudden are woke because you took the pill, and then you see how the world really is.
Good point. Yeah, a lot like The Matrix. Yeah, with like the real world and the world everyone perceives. So good point.
And how we're all sort of kept at bay and like just given enough to make it by or be happy or not, incite an uprising. Yet when we see the world as it truly is, then, get ready for some payback. And so I think that's what's happening in our world right now. It's like people are done. Like they see the world as it is functioning, and they're protesting.
So there's one female character named Holly who Roddy kidnapped. His name's Nada, actually, so I don't know if we should call him that or not, but he ends up kidnapping her, and then going to her house to kind of get away from the cops. And then she pretends she's going to go have a drink, and she like hits him over the head with the bottle, and he falls out of this window and falls like 50 feet. But somehow just gets up and walks it off. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and this actress, Meg Foster, she's got these incredibly pale blue eyes, and they're just piercing. And I was reading about her career, and she was told in many other roles that she had to wear contacts to sort of subdue her eye color because they were too they stood out too much. And Mark was saying, well, she almost looks like an alien, so it's interesting casting. And then of course later we find out she is working with the aliens. And side note, she is the only human character that Roddy Piper kills.
Oh, good point. Yeah. No, I thought her eyes were fake because they were so blue, but you're saying they're real. Yeah, she definitely looked like a man droid or a woman droid or whatever you want to call it. No, he had the typical John Carpenter music in this. I thought it was a little campy, a lot of harmonicas and like 2 or 3 notes on a piano like usual.
Yeah, I mean, it's this whole movie though. It's like striking that balance between horror and drama and comedy. I mean, it's definitely not taking itself so seriously because, like, Roddy Piper's famous line, "I came here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." Apparently, you know, that he ad-libbed that, and it's like the most famous line of the movie. And he ended up using it in wrestling, and people have adapted that line for, you know, other movies since then. But it's pretty badass.
Yeah, I've heard that line a lot on this radio show. They used to say it a lot. So yeah, I'm here to do 2 things. Kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all I think I said it backwards. I already screwed it up.
It's fine. Everyone knows. But yeah, so I mean that's not taking itself so seriously. You know, that's pretty silly. It reminds me of Bruce Campbell when he's like the Jack and shit and Jack left town or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, he had another one I wrote down that's he saw the lady again and found out she was bad or something, and he's like, "Ain't love grand," or something stupid like that. Well, they had drones in this movie, which were not too different to the drones now, so I thought that was a pretty spot-on prediction.
Yeah, they were like mini UFOs, but they ended up actually, looking like drones that we have now, sort of, in a way, so that was cool. And they had the watches, like you said, to communicate, but then it also would open a portal so that they could get to safety. Cable 54 was the place where they were broadcasting the signal from. Our first hint, Holly, I think her name was Holly in the movie, she comes in and to the meeting of, you know, the people who are woke and says, like, no, there's no signal coming from there. And everyone's just like, oh, crap, you know, what are we going to do? But later we find out the signal is coming from there. And she was covering for them because humans were working for the aliens and then they got rich because of it as their payment.
So she showed up at that meeting of the people who are going to have the rebellion or whatever. So she must have been involved with bringing all those cops there. Damn it. Yeah,
I know.
That was a crazy scene. The cops just came in and just started killing everybody. So that was unfortunate. But like Kelly said, there was that really cool scene in the alley, like a shootout scene. And then the aliens could just like disappear, but they stole one of their watches. I think you already said this. I don't know. But they ended up going, you know, if you press this button on the watch, it'll like create this hole, and you jump through the hole, and that's how they got basically to the headquarters of the whole deal.
It's interesting how I was talking about this. Roddy Piper's character, he obviously has a hard time, you know, understanding and accepting what's going on at first. He's seeing all of the billboards and what they really say. He's seeing the people for who they are, and they're just disgusting. They're like skeleton robot things. He's seeing, you know, the money and everything in the world has changed. But as soon as he accepts this shift and like what is actually happening, he just decides, like, he's like, nope, I'm all in and I'm going to fight this. And it's this interesting shift because all of a sudden he's just like this vigilante who's going to fight the bad guys. And it's sort of ridiculous, but it's also sort of awesome. It reminds me a little bit of the Terminator and, like I said, First Blood and also like Snake Plissken.
Yeah, I can't think of any more examples, but yeah, like that hero type character. And I mean, it's kind of hard to believe he didn't get caught because he's just literally walking around the streets with a shotgun and a gun. But no, he made his way around and he dominated. And then he, you know, at the end, I felt it a little hard to believe, like all that it took to take down this huge organization was like shooting the satellite thing, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, I'll accept it. Oh, something I read too, like, so he shot the thing and he ended up getting shot in turn. So he was about to die. And the helicopter that, you know, the guys had shot him from, he gives the finger to. And he said his only regret is that he would have not done his middle finger so weak that he would have like straightened his middle finger out more in that scene. Isn't that funny?
I actually noticed that. It was kind of like a weak, like little, like, ugh. But I mean, you're dying, whatever. But yeah, It wasn't the best. I'd give it like a 4 out of 10 on the flick off on that one.
Roddy, if you're listening, I'm so sorry. I know that you like that's the thing he regrets, and you brought it up. I mean, I brought it up, but you're saying that that's not okay.
Well, they do say that like steroids like weaken the tendons in your fingers. So no, I'm just joking.
Oh, Roddy, if you sue us for libel, we don't have any money. I'm sorry.
No, I wanted to ask you this question. Did you ever watch wrestling growing up, or?
Yeah, Saturday mornings it was on, or Saturday afternoons, and I would watch, but I was never like a super fan. I know people who are super fans to this day. Like, they're just obsessed.
Yeah, my brother and I used to watch wrestling, like in the Jake the Snake, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior type era. And then we'd always make like a fake wrestling ring in my basement, like with couches and have like wrestling matches. So obviously it never went anywhere because I'm not a professional wrestler, but it was fun. But then, I don't know. Then we realized it was fake and stopped watching it.
Mark, you might have just like ruined that for a lot of people.
I should have said spoil. I don't know if it's fake. That's my opinion, everybody. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, there of course there's real wrestling, but there's also wrestling that's, full of actors and stunts, and that's cool. Oh, speaking of wrestling though, they actually on TV, they wrestle on those mats that have a little bit of give, but man, these two guys in that alley, that was concrete.
Yeah, that was a super intense fight. Like you said, they were getting pretty physical, and like I felt like it was too long. I'm sorry. Like it was just a bit much. And like the amount of abuse these guys were taking, like they wouldn't have. And then what do they do after that? They get a hotel room together and go drink. Like,
what else are you gonna do?
I don't know. That's a good point.
I mean, don't ask the question if. I mean, wow, yeah. I mean, because then his friend realized, okay, these are aliens, and so yeah, what else are we gonna do? We gotta heal our wounds, lick our wounds, and fight with the rebellion.
And we didn't really talk about this yet, but they were making these sunglasses, I believe, at this church right across from the community he was staying in. And somehow they figured out like how to make these things. And then he found a box of them and he put them in a trash can. And I'm like, okay, that's a terrible idea. But
he didn't know what they were at first until, when he buried them. He just took one pair and then threw away the rest. So I don't blame him.
It's true. But I was like, okay, if you're going to hide something, I probably won't hide it in a trash can because they're probably going to take it. As it turns out, he got back because, when he got pushed out the window, he lost his sunglasses. So he had to come back. And try to get them, but at that moment, the garbage man had just taken the garbage. So there was a pretty cool scene where he had to go into a garbage truck and find these glasses, and then it like dumped him back out. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun. And then, speaking of technological advances, when they went to the meeting, then they had upgraded to contact lenses. And shout out to, they look like gas permeable contacts, which if any of my contact lens wearers are out there, had to have those. I had to have them because apparently my prescription was so strong that that's the only kind that I could see clearly through. But you know what? I gave up on contacts years ago. Like, I'm done with it. I've never looked into LASIK, but I'm a glasses wearer, and I'll accept that.
Yeah, Kelly, you look great. You look great in glasses, so.
Thanks.
You're welcome. But no, it was a good idea to switch to the contacts, because then they didn't have to keep switching back and forth. You take them on, you take them off, it's color, it's black and white. I didn't notice, maybe they weren't doing like the point of view shots as much.
No, they did. I purposely, and I read this, they did switch, when they got the contacts, they switched to color. So they could see them in color now. Isn't that cool?
Oh, I didn't even notice that. So then everything was in color then. Yep. Including, okay, that makes sense. But I didn't notice the signs and stuff as much. But maybe they still had it and I just didn't notice.
Or maybe they filtered it out within the contacts because it only mattered really who the aliens were. I don't know.
Good point. But then, so is it like a subliminal message on all those signs? Apparently.
Yes, exactly. It's also about subliminal messages, which you can read more about in our books, because we talk about that, especially in our first one, The Science of Monsters, and how governments and advertisers for decades have been using subliminal messages, which it's creepy and fascinating.
So I'm going to challenge Beth Florence on this. I feel like there's a Saved by the Bell episode with subliminal messages, but I can't remember everything, so I'm going to have to talk to you about that, Beth.
Okay. So, yeah, get in touch. Add him on Twitter.
So if you could have a pair of sunglasses like this that you could see the true world, would you want to see that, or do you like living in your ignorant bliss that you're currently living in?
I think I would need to be woke, because we can't afford to not be woke at this point in our lives, at this point in 2020. Like, yeah, ignorance may be bliss, but you know what? If we can be woke and change the world for the better, we need to. It's our responsibility.
Well, I mean, I'm here to chew bubble gum and kick ass, and I'm almost out of bubble gum. So yeah, I think I'm going to need the glasses.
There you go. Revolution is upon us. Now, should we rank this movie, or do you have anything else to say about it first?
Just a quick thing about the very end. They were pretty self-aware once he shot the satellite. And then everyone who was the alien pretty much got exposed. So they had, I think it was supposed to be Siskel and Ebert, like reviewing movies, and I think they were both aliens. Which
is like a funny shout out to probably John Carpenter was like, oh, you don't like my movies? Guess what? You're aliens.
Yeah, I know. That was, a pretty creative idea. And then...
Oh, and also they were talking about they purposely threw John Carpenter by name and George Romero under the bus in their review. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so self-aware. I love it.
Like while they were giving the review? Yeah. Okay, I didn't notice that. And then, oddly enough, I don't think there'd been any nudity in the movie at all. And like the final shot of the movie is like, it's like a point of view of like a guy having sex with a lady, and she's like, you can see her boobs, and she's on top of him. Then she looks down, and he's like an alien, and he's like, what? So that was, and then it just ended. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it was like that that sense of humor, but also like, really, do we need to see that? But whatever. So let's rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being you think it's a perfect movie, and we need a scale.
I think the sunglasses.
It has to be the sunglasses. How many sunglasses do you give They Live?
I thought this movie had a good concept to it. I felt like the execution was possibly lacking. I don't know. Some of the secondary tier actors, I felt like didn't do a great job.
P.S. They actually cast real homeless people, I read.
Well, I take it all back.
And guess what? They didn't get paid. They only got fed.
Wow, I feel like an asshole. Okay. I don't know, because I never saw this movie.
That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to defend your decision.
No, I'm just saying, I never saw this movie way back when, so I didn't have the nostalgia factor. I'm gonna give it a 5 sunglasses out of 10. Like I thought the concept was really good, and it was cool once the big moment hit. But I think before that, it wasn't too great. It was a little corny, cheesy. I thought Rowdy did a pretty good job acting. A few not so great scenes, but I don't know. I mean, it was entertaining, but it wasn't super memorable for me.
That's fair. No, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 sunglasses. It did not live up to my memory of it, and that's fine. That happens. It had the nostalgia factor for me, the things that were mind-blowing. I remember those moments of him putting on the sunglasses and realizing, what the world really looks like compared to what we think it does. And that is a great concept. But on the rewatch, it was there's some pacing things and there's some tone things that are a little bit off. And so it didn't live up to my expectations. And that's fine. Now, Meg is going to talk to us about the Stephen King book of short stories, If It Bleeds. Take it away, Meg.
Hi, Rewinders, it's Meg, and I'm so excited to talk about another book with you today. Here it is a beautiful summer day, the kind of day where I want to sit out on my deck and drink a beer, so I think I'll do that later. I hope wherever you are, despite what's going on in the world, that you're finding joy in the little things. So, I am talking about If It Bleeds by Stephen King. I was so excited. It's such a treat to get my hardcover Stephen King book. And don't worry, I'm sharing it with my friends. It's already out to one friend, so I'm sharing the love. But it was kind of interesting because this is 4 novellas, and usually we get a short story collection or we get a novel. So this was kind of a nice little change of pace. So I'm going to just talk briefly about the 4 novellas. And when I'm doing books, I don't like to be spoilery because I want to encourage you to go out and buy it. So the first story is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, and this out of the 4 is probably my least favorite. It wasn't bad. It just didn't hook me quite as well as the other 3 did. It's very classic Stephen King in that it is, obviously takes place in Maine. There are the sort of similar elements that you look for in a Stephen King short story. There's a sort of heartening relationship, a very, sweet relationship between a boy who's about 12 or 13 and the old man down the street. And I really liked how Stephen King really focused on their relationship. And of course, murder and mayhem ensues, but I thought it was a really poignant story. Next is The Life of Chuck. I talked about this briefly on our host episode about that I tweeted that it's my new favorite Stephen King short work. And that's really true because I love stories that just stretch your mind and make you think. And there are some really poignant moments again in this story. I feel like as Stephen King is getting older, he's sort of softening up a little bit. I think he's always been good about writing dynamics and relationships between people, but I don't know. I think in his old age, he's kind of realizing what's important and writing about it. And this story very much feels like someone who has some wisdom to share, yet he does it in such an interesting way. And I'm not going to give anything away. I just really liked how he chose to sort of present this idea. And I saw a lot of people on like Stephen King boards on Facebook being like, I don't get it. I don't get the story. And that's totally okay. Like maybe it just narratively doesn't make as much sense as some of his other stories because it is very like cerebral and it's sort of almost sci-fi in its approach. So I can see how that would be a little confusing. But I really, really loved it, and it just made me like sit and close the book and stare out into the forest and think about my life. And next is If It Bleeds, and I think this story is obviously the name of the collection, but I think this is the story that everyone was the most sort of fervent to get their hands on because it is about Holly Gibney, who we've met in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy as well as The Outsider, and even people who haven't even read those have maybe watched The Outsider or watched the other actress in the Mr. Mercedes TV show. So she's become quite an iconic character in the last several years. And she is one of my favorite characters that Stephen King has ever delved into. One reason being is she's been in a lot more works than, a lot of his characters. And she just, I don't know, there's something about Holly, the way she's written, and I loved how she was portrayed in the Outsider TV show as well, but there's something about her that just resonates with me. Not that I feel so similar to her, but she just is authentic, and sometimes Stephen King's characters, every once in a while they can get a little absurd on you, which is okay. I don't mind that so much, but with Holly, I just feel like this heartfelt authentic personality inside of her, and she feels like a real beating heart to me. And so I was very excited to get back into the world of Holly Gibney and see what she's up to. And one way that Stephen King sort of portrays that is she has a pretty complicated relationship with her mother, and we see that in other books, and in this one it's I don't know, for me it even struck even more of a chord. So but aside from that, I don't want to give anything away because I went into this not knowing anything. What I will say is that it went a few different directions that I wasn't expecting. Jerome and Barbara in it, so that was really fun. There are also some beloved characters that I was happy to see. And, what do I say without saying too much? What I'll say is, at one point as I was reading it, I was like, how is this going to be a short novella and not an entire novel? Because I think we all know Stephen King can go on and on for many hundreds of pages, which we love and enjoy. But I was like, how is he going to finish this? But it does come to a conclusion, and it is probably the most pulse-pounding story, definitely the most pulse-pounding story of the collection. I read it quite quickly. And lastly is Rat, which I believe the front cover sort of pays homage to. I think it also pays homage to If It Bleeds as well, but that cat with that creepy nose that is also a rat is quite a great book cover. I love it. Rat. I love this story. I think mainly because I'm a writer, and there were some things he says in this story that just went into my chest and ripped my heart out. Being a writer is a unique experience, and he obviously knows how to describe it and put words to it. And so that was probably my favorite part of the story. And, this story is, again, Maine. It has a writer as the protagonist. It's very similar to a Stephen King sort of story of what you want. And so I can't say more good things about all the stories. I saw some mixed reviews before I started reading it. I don't know why I even look at reviews, and a lot of them are just random people on Twitter, so I should just not even look. But actually I was really, really pleasantly surprised by this collection. In a time where I need escapism really bad, it really did that for me. I would say, aside from the first story, which I kind of struggled to sort of get into, the other three I very much didn't want to stop reading, so I got through it pretty fast. So if I can't recommend it enough, I don't know what else is going to convince you to get If It Bleeds. If you need to borrow my hardcover, let me know. When I get it back, I can start a list. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you in the horror book section, Horror Rewinders.
All right, awesome. Well, we hope you all are having a good week. We encourage you to read and donate and support the cause in our world right now. We are very passionate about uplifting and supporting diverse voices and changing the world and everything around us. And so until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Bye.